Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 podcast network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. While you're checking that stuff out, make sure you check out all the articles, the events, the videos, the academies, and of course the donate link. Check that donate link out. Just click on it and see what happens. I'll tell you what will happen. You'll go to a page and you can become a supporter of 1517. That's what will happen. And if you're somebody who does support the work, we appreciate it very much. If you would like to support the work, hit that link and join up. We would appreciate that very much. This is episode number 2 in the Song of Solomon, or the Song of Songs, which is Solomon, as the book starts with. We did not get very far. We kind of did a long introduction, got into the first couple verses. Just to recap, it's interesting. The Song of Solomon doesn't start with Solomon. He's not the first one speaking. No, he puts some words in the mouth of the bride. She's going to start out just hot. She comes right out of the gate, and she's like, I need those kisses of your mouth. Your love is better than wine. Hey, your anointing oils are fragrant. You smell good. Your name, I love saying it. It's like the best thing. I can't stop saying it. It's on my lips all the time. Everyone loves you. I mean, every eligible maiden would love to be in my position right now. In fact, that's a little troublesome. So let's just rush off together. We're just going to run off to the chambers, and that's kind of where we ended. The bride has not said a bunch yet, but she hasn't wasted any words, Chad.
No, it's not a slow lead in. She jumps right in with both feet. That's a really good summary of those first 4 verses too. I mean, she is all about him, which is the way love songs work. Now this one, not only is she all about him, but when you look at the big perspective, either analogically or typologically or however you want to view it, this is also the bride of Christ talking to Christ. So this outpouring, this exuberant outpouring of adoration and love and desire, all of that's indicative of just how much she is in love with him. So that's first 4.5 verses, and then we have a kind of a half verse, I guess 4b, which is most of the time taken as like a chorus, I suppose, like the later Greek plays would have a chorus. And so not always, I mean, there's some people interpret this we here as like the woman speaking to the man, like we will exult and rejoice in you. But even though that's possible, I think it's better to understand this as not just this verse, but there's some other ones as well. It's like a third party. Maybe it's the daughters of Jerusalem, which we'll hear about in a minute. Maybe it's some other chorus, but if you take this as kind of a dramatization, as some people do, then this would be, you have your man, you have your woman, and you have this chorus which kind of joins on occasion, or in some cases is also addressed by the woman. But here they're going to, if we take it as the chorus, they're going to say something about this love that they share. And here's what they say. This is 4b. We will exult and rejoice in you. We will extol your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you. Those 2 verbs in Hebrew, exult and rejoice, actually occur quite a bit as a pair in the Psalms. So these are just common expressions for, in the Psalms, rejoicing over the Lord, exulting over him. Now, in this case, we would be this chorus, if we take it that way, are exulting and rejoicing over you. That is in reference to the man. So we too, she says, everybody is in love with you. And the everybody here represented by the chorus says, yeah, we're exulting, rejoicing in you. We're extolling your love more than wine. I mean, wine's great. It's for rejoicing. In some cases, leaves you intoxicated. Well, better than that is this kind of love intoxication. Your love is better than wine. And so they conclude by saying, rightly do they love you. And I take this as kind of like, as one commentator puts it, it's not surprising that every woman loves you.
Right.
You're so lovely. You're so desirable. You're so perfect in every way, of course, every woman is in love with you. So rightly do they love you. So this is kind of a confirmation, we might say, of everything that the female has been saying so far. She praises his love as better than wine, and the chorus says, "We will extol your love more than wine." And she talks about how the virgins love you, and the chorus responds with, "Yes, of course, rightly do they love you." So anyway, that's the first four verses. We haven't gotten very far, but there each of these verses has so much, so many details. And as I've discovered working my way through this, I mean, there's just because it's poetry, it tends to pack a lot more into just a few verses, into a few words. And a lot of these are metaphors that are just unfamiliar to us. Or maybe they're familiar from other parts of the scripture, but they're used a little bit differently here. We're going to come across a lot of images from the animal world or images from the from plants and flowers and trees, or in some cases different family groups like the people of Kadar. So it just takes some time to kind of unpack this so you can appreciate the poetry of what is being communicated.
Well, this in this next part, where she's gonna is this response to what was just happening, seems too that like maybe there's like an insecurity here, right? Where everybody loves this guy, and they're like, oh yeah, rightly does everyone love him? I mean, it's almost involuntary, you know? I mean,
Mhm.
how could it's
Yeah.
uncontrollable? How could you not? And then you see her move into a thing where she talks about maybe some things that and this doesn't hit us right at all because this is very strange to us. But for this time, there's something about her that's very obvious, that's very external, that she would think would be a disadvantage for her in this
Yes.
maybe competition for this person's love.
Yeah. Yeah, and insecurity, I think, is a good word for it. In fact, she's more than once going to use, she kind of balances it, but she kind of uses almost self-deprecating descriptions of herself. She'll use it here in reference to the color of her skin, the tone of her skin. In chapter 2, she's going to compare herself to just being, I'm just one more flower in a whole field of flowers. And what's kind of cool is every time, well, not every time, but most of the time, when she kind of denigrates herself or expresses this insecurity, then her lover, the man, is going to come back and basically take what she says, but use it to demonstrate, oh no, yeah, you're far more than that. So it's his way of taking her and uplifting her and showing her that she is actually gorgeous beyond description.
Hey, you know what?
So
Solomon might be the first guy that was like, I actually think a tan is a good thing.
yeah, this might be the first recorded instance of sun-kissed skin being desirable.
No one could have
So
thought
that's
that.
what
No one could have thought there'd be a whole industry around like trying to, fake tan yourself. But Solomon
yeah.
was out in front of this. He thought this was a good thing.
If there's not already a tan lotion named Solomon, definitely needs to be. Just just putting it out there for someone who's in that field. Let me read 5 through 7. So this is the woman speaking. I am very dark, but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keepers of the vineyards. But my own vineyard I have not kept. Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? So I think the first thing you have to point out is that we can tell from the context that this is not a remark upon her the color of her skin with regard to her race, but instead this is a sun darkened color of her skin. And we know that because, as she says in verse 6, the sun has looked upon me. And yeah, this is why this seems so strange to us, because culturally, I don't know if it's like this around the world today, but certainly in our culture, tan skin is considered to be more attractive than pale skin. But here, it's the exact opposite. Now, why would this be? Well, because most of the time, if you were part of the upper echelon of society, if you were wealthy, then you wouldn't be out. You certainly wouldn't be on the beach tanning your skin. No,
Right.
nor would you have a job working in vineyards where, of course, because you're exposed to the sun, you're going to have a tan. So with her, when she says, we would say, I'm very tan. I mean, literally, it's, I'm very dark. But more colloquial English, we would say, I'm very tan, but lovely. We would say, I'm very tan and lovely. But she says, I'm very tan, but nevertheless, even though I have a tan, a dark tan, I'm still lovely. And then she's speaking here to the daughters of Jerusalem, which I think is important too, because the daughters of Jerusalem maybe she's the country girl, and the daughters of Jerusalem, of course, are those of the city. And maybe this, whether it's a real conversation or not, really doesn't matter. This poetry, but like she's talking to the rich elite city girls who wouldn't have a tan, and she's saying to them, "Oh, I've got a tan, but I'm still pretty." And she's like, and then we have a twofold comparison, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. And I think here one is more of a simile compared to what her skin looks like, and one is more of a simile that is talking about her beauty. So the tents of Kedar, Kedar is the Kedar were a Bedouin tribe from northern Arabia, and probably their tents would have been like from the hair of goats, so that would have been black or dark tents. In fact, there's a couple of different times. I think the other one is what is that? Psalm 120. Too long has my soul had its dwelling with those who hate peace, and he talks about dwelling in the tents of Kedar. So this is kind of uh, a picture of not only being away from Israel, but also of the color of their tents. So my skin is like the tents of Kedar. That is, it's dark. But then the curtains of Solomon would have been beautiful. Whether this was the curtains of Solomon's of the temple, or maybe something to do with his palace, whatever it was, these would have been, of course, exquisite curtains. And so she's saying, "I'm dark like the tents of Kedar, but I'm lovely like the curtains of Solomon."
And maybe there's an implication that she knows what those curtains look like.
Yeah, it's very yeah, very possible.
You
Probably
know, you might
probably she does.
you daughters of Jerusalem might not know this, but my skin is dark, like a tent. But I am actually very beautiful. I would compare it to, I don't know, the tents of Solomon. You know, you might not be familiar with those because you've never been in his house, but
But
I have.
I have, yeah. Like Solomon and I are very close,
Yeah.
intimate, even you might say, you might say. And then so she continues, "Don't look at me, or stop gazing at me, because I'm dark." And this is not the exact same Hebrew word that she uses above for very dark. It's like a diminutive form of that, but it's basically the
And what
same
isn't this?
root of that word.
Isn't this more like "Don't stare at me"?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, you can imagine a bunch of girls in a room, and there's the daughters of Jerusalem, who, according to the cultural standards of the day, are looking beautiful because their skin is pale. And there she is, very tan, and they're kind of looking they're at her, and maybe not looking at her in an approving sort of way. That's what she says basically.
Little gawking going
Yeah, a
on.
little gawking going on. I mean, not that ever happens, of course, but in this case it did.
That would never
So
happen. No.
yeah, yeah. Stop staring at me, because I'm dark, because I'm extremely tan, because the sun has looked upon me. Okay, now we're finally going to get to the reason why. I mean, she hasn't been out on the beach, nor she just been working kind of in general outside, but she's been working in a vineyard. So why was she working in a vineyard? Well, evidently her brothers, whom she calls her mother's sons, and almost seems like a distancing of herself from them, right? Why would
This is
you why would
this
you refer to your brother as your mother's sons?
this is
Uh,
some wicked stepmother stuff going on here. Who knows? You might have had some fairy tales like lifted right out of this thing as far as,
Very
Okay,
much,
so
it's very much a Cinderella kind of deal, isn't it?
oh yeah, like because
Yeah.
you're like okay, so we're gonna have this like beautiful peasant girl who doesn't look like the rest of them because she doesn't, because she has to work, like, and she has to, so she has to be outside, and these other ones are, if they go outside, they have like an umbrella and a fan, and they make sure that the sun never touches their skin. Not her. She's got to be out there in the vineyards. Why does she have to go out there in the vineyards? Oh, well, my wicked stepmother, her sons, were angry with me, so they just made me do all their work. Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is sounding very fairy tale-ish.
Very, very fairy tale-ish, yeah. And there's who knows? I mean, there are variations of the Cinderella story. I mean, we're familiar with kind of the Disney versions, but culturally speaking, going way back, there's all kinds of versions of this. So maybe this is there could have been versions of that floating around already back then. Who knows? There's a little play on words here. So we got the sun, of course, as a major theme here, but the word for angry is hara in Hebrew, which literally means to be heated against someone. So it's kind of a play on words here. Yeah, the sun has been heating up my skin, and the reason that happened is because my brothers were incensed. We might say in English would be a good translation for this. My brothers were hot toward me. They were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyard. So these mean brothers making her go out and work in the vineyard. And then when she says this, but my own vineyard I have not kept, we probably need some quotes around vineyard because as we'll see as the song develops, vineyard ends up becoming a metaphor for the human body. Like there's a lot of metaphors for the human body. In chapter 2, she's going to talk about her lover is an apple tree and she likes to be under his shade and eat of his fruit. And there's all sorts of imagery from trees to plants to flowers, which are connected with the human body. So it's kind of she's talking about literally, I got to work in the vineyard. That's why I have this tan, which isn't the cultural norm for beauty. And because I have this tan, because I had to work to get this, and I have this tan, I wasn't able to take care of my own body to keep it from having a tan. That's what she's saying. So I couldn't keep, I couldn't protect my own vineyard, that is to say, my own body from becoming tan because my brothers made me work in the vineyard. So that it's sort of a transition to the next verse because here she's been talking to the daughters of Jerusalem, and now we have an abrupt shift where she's going to talk to her lover. This is verse 7, where she says, tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? So, having conversed back and forth with the daughters of Jerusalem, now she turns to her lover and says, where are you, basically? And he's depicted here as a shepherd. So he is the one that she loves, and she wants to know, hey, where are you pasturing your flock, and where do you make it lie down at noon? So in the hot climate of that world, well, at noon and probably for a little while after that, you find some shade. You're not going to be out there in the heat of say 12 to 2 o'clock or 12 to 3 o'clock or whatever it is, trying to find some place to take your sheep. You're going to find some shade. So where are you? Where are you at noon? Where are you making your flock lie down? Because why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? Why should I be one who's just basically out there looking for you? I'm going to this group and to that group, and I can't find where you're at. Some people, in fact, actually quite a few commentators think that maybe if a woman was veiled out there, like going from one group to another, that she was a prostitute. And the reason they say that is because way back in, what was that, Genesis 38? Yeah, Genesis 38, where you have the story of Tamar, who puts a veil on.
Yeah.
And then when her father-in-law Judah comes by, is she's hired by him to be a prostitute. So maybe that's what's going on. Maybe not. If it is, then she's saying, why do I need to be out here looking like I'm a prostitute when I would much rather be with you, knowing where you are, so I can take off my veil and be with you.
Yeah, I think there's two things about this. I have two thoughts about it anyway. One is the guy here, which we would say, of course, is Christ, and then the woman is church. N- Not surprising that this guy's a shepherd. Okay, all right. So like Jesus is a shepherd in this song. Great. That all tracks, right? So just pointing that out in case you missed it. There you go. You got what does this guy do? Well, he does some shepherding, which of course so he's probably the good shepherd. Chad, I would say if I had to say who this was, I think he's the best of the shepherds. That
I
seems
would definitely go with that.
that seems
Yeah.
to be what it is. Also, one of the things that kind of seems like is going on here is there's as we talked about, there's this insecurity happening, and maybe even from yeah, from these other daughters of Jerusalem, maybe this idea that she is not good enough for him. Which, by the way, of course, this also goes into the church and Christ. The church is not good enough for Christ, obviously. As a member of the bride of Christ, I could say that definitively, in and of ourselves, we are not good enough for Jesus. He deserves better. but, um, but yeah, there seems to be some of that, and there it seems that what she's saying is like, I have these insecurities already. There is this perception that I'm not good enough for you. Like you could have anyone. Why would you want me? And having me roam around from pasture to pasture, from flock to flock, looking for you, um, is actually kind of degrading to me. Like people are like, "Well, why? Like, can she not find him? Did you leave her? Is this? Can I just not? Can you just tell me where you are so I can be with you? Because I don't want to do this because this also plays on all those insecurities, and people are watching me do this, and I don't want to do any of that. And so, if you love me, do me this favor and tell me where you are so I can just be with you.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And uh, especially what you said at the beginning, where she's unworthy of his love. I mean that tracks not only with the rest of what we know in Scripture as well as our own lives, but I know that I looked at this. It's been probably 2 or 3 years ago now, but I was interested in that verse about being dark but lovely. And if you look at all of the medieval commentators who treated this allegorically, I mean, they made a lot out of that simply because it fits with the church's life. You know, we are unattractive in the sense that in and of ourselves we have, as they might have said, we have been tanned by all the dark forces of this world. But I mean, besides the allegory, I mean, it does fit. It's not like Christ came down from heaven and he looked around and he chose as his own this group of morally just beautifully righteous people, you know, the best of the best. No, that's not the way this works. He came for sinners, and that fits with her own self-description as one who is has been exposed to the sun, and so also we ourselves are. Don't match the beauty of what we'd expect that Christ would be looking for. But
Yeah. It's the fact that we are the church is not loved because it is lovely. It is lovely. It is made lovely because it is loved by Christ.
yeah, yeah, I don't remember who said this first, but the idea that even before Christ looked at us, he loved us.
Yeah.
You know, it's different. It's different than, I mean, every guy knows this. You know, you're looking for someone who's lovely in your eyes, at least. And you don't know that until you see the woman, right? And like,
Yeah.
oh, she's attractive. She's beautiful. She's lovely. So we look and then we see beauty and we're attracted to that. And with Christ, it's the opposite. Even before he looks, he loves. And then his love actually makes the beloved beautiful.
Yeah.
And we're finally going to get to him now. So he's gonna have something to say. She's been doing all the talking besides the chorus, and now we finally get to hear from him. And here's what he says. This is going to be 8, 9, and 10. So this is a response to her. She's basically saying, "Hey, let me know where you're at. I want to be with you. I don't want to be wandering around looking for you." And he says this: "If you don't know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flock and pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents. I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with a string of jewels. It's almost, I don't know if this is right or not, but it almost kind of sounds teasing as he starts out. He first of all says, of course, you are the most beautiful among women. I don't mean teasing there. But when he says, follow in the tracks of the flocks and pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents, almost as if to say, "Oh, come on, you can find me. All you have to do is follow the tracks, and you'll figure out where I'm at." So I don't what anyway. That's the way it strikes me. But either way, he's telling her, "You can find me. Just follow the tracks of the flock." I mean, it's not hard to follow. You don't have to be like some sort of Native American tracker who can put his nose to the ground and say, "Oh, someone was here 5 days ago." You just you can track, you can follow the flock, and then you know where I'm at. I love the way it begins though, because he she's been talking about her skin and why it is the way it is. And he then turns around by affirming her beauty. He doesn't just say, if you don't know, oh, beautiful woman. He says, if you don't know, oh, most beautiful among women. So right away he's elevating her to this highest level of beauty. And then following that compliment up with saying, here's the way that you can find where I'm at. And
Yeah.
then he makes a comparison. Go ahead.
So I really love verse 8. I did a talk of it was years and years and years ago. I think it was called the Old Roads. But it's basically just a talk about um, the ancient paths to God.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually one of the verses that I used, and there's this just think just as if you take this as the bride of Christ, saying, "Where do I find you?" He simply says, "Don't you know where to find me? You just follow the tracks where the sheep have always gone." Right, and I think
Perfect.
and I think this is how this works. If we're asking ourselves as the bride of Christ, where do we find you? It's like, follow the sheep. Where do they go? Right, and what I was talking about, I was talking about going to the places where God has said where He's found, which is in the church, in baptism, in the Lord's Supper, and the preaching of the Word. But it's just, don't try to fit. Like, don't you know? Like, the sheep have walked this path many a time. This is well trodden. Follow the rest of the sheep, and you'll find me. I'm
Yeah.
where the sheep are. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is good.
that is perfect. That is perfect. It also reminds me of kind of this exchange. Like, you should be able to know where I'm at. Reminds me of John 14 when Jesus says, "You know the way I'm going."
Yeah,
And Thomas is like, "We don't even know where you're going. How can we know the way?"
yeah,
And I always see this as one of those, like, Jesus looks like right into Thomas's eyes. I am the way, the truth, and the
yeah,
life. It's not hard to find me. You're looking at the way right here.
yeah,
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, he is the way. You follow the path of the sheep. That's exactly how you find where
Well,
Christ
Jesus,
is.
Jesus, God's answer to like, "Where are you?" is, I feel like, always the same. It's like, where I said I'd be.
Yeah, it. That is one of the beautiful things about Old Testament and New Testament. God does not play hide and seek. He's not difficult to find. He's always like, as I always like to say, especially with the Old Testament, you you ask any Israelite where God is, and they should be able to tell you the precise location,
Yeah,
not just zip code, but like address. Oh, he's right over there. That tent, that's where God is. Or that temple, that's where God is. There's none of this. "Oh, well, he's somewhere up in the hills, deep inside a dark cave, and if you search long and hard enough, you can find him." No, he's like conspicuous. He's always where you know he is to be found.
yeah.
And then, so having said that, verse 9, he makes a comparison that I have to say, this sounds like my dad. My dad would make this kind of comparison. My
This
my
is
dad
this is how
was
your
one of the
dad this is how your dad roped your mother in right here, Chad. This is how it
yeah,
happened.
yeah,
He laid
pun
eyes on her and
intended.
dropped this line.
Yep, pun intended, actually. Yeah, my dad was always my dad was born with a love of horses. It was like in his DNA. So he was born in 1941, and I don't know what they were making recordings on back then, but my grandparents still possessed this recording of my dad, and he could not have been more than 3 or 4 years old. And he was talking nonstop about horses. It's like, and they had no horses. It wasn't like he was raised in a family of horse people. They didn't have any, but he loved horses from the time he was, the youngest kid to his dying day. And he would always make comparisons between horses and women, which he didn't mean it derogatorily. It's just what he did. So this would have been a verse that my dad would definitely have identified with, where Solomon says, "I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots." Now, I think a couple of things are going on here. Number one, of course, Pharaoh's chariots is pointing toward Egypt, and Egypt was known as, like, if you wanted a top quality horse in the ancient world, you went to Egypt. I mean, that was the best of the best. So if you got a horse from Egypt, then it was top notch. And the mare part here is significant. So not just a horse and certainly not a stud, but a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. A couple things could be going on here. Number one, of course, she's a female. So if you're going to compare her to a horse, then you compare her to a mare. But also another thing that might be happening here is he's saying that you are you're so beautiful, you're so attractive that you tend to catch the eye and almost be a distraction to all the guys who are around you. I can't remember which pharaoh it was, but there was a battle in Egypt where the pharaoh took a mare who was in heat and released her among the chariot forces of the enemy. And this mare in heat just messed everything up because all the studs were pulling the chariots were just completely distracted by the mare. So either he's just comparing her to like the most beautiful of horses, or he's also saying you are a distraction to every man that you're around because you're so beautiful.
I don't know exactly what horses are pulling Pharaoh's chariots, but it seems like at the very least the implication here is that you stand out, right?
Oh yeah,
Because that would
yeah,
stand. You'd be like, "What is this horse doing here?"
yeah. You stand out. I don't. I think from what I've read, they use studs. I guess they suppose they could have used geldings, but anyway, they would not have used mares to pull the chariots. So yeah, she definitely stands out. We also have here the first occurrence of the I don't know if term of endearment is right, or romantic nickname, or whatever you want to call it, but the man is going to call her Ra'aya, which is translated here as love. So Ra'aya is going to occur throughout the poem. This is just kind of his, whatever you call your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever you call them, beautiful or sweetheart or darling or whatever it is. This is the word that he uses to describe her. So Ra'aya. And her name for him is going to come up in a few more verses, and she calls him Dode or Dodi, which is usually translated as beloved. So just two different ways in which he addresses her and then she addresses him. So ESV translates his address of her as my love, and then her address of him as my beloved. But this is the first occurrence of what he calls her. And then he compares her cheeks as being lovely with ornaments, and her neck with a string of jewels. Just one more of the ways in which he's describing her beauty. And then we have another course, verse 11, which is pretty short. We will make for you ornaments of gold studded with silver. This kind of piggybacking off of his description of her with ornaments and jewels. And the chorus echoes this, saying, "Oh yeah, we'll add to that. We're going to make for you these golden ornaments that are studded with silver." Okay, we got time for a couple more.
Let's give it a shot, man.
All right, so we'll do three more verses. This is her speaking. She says, "While the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved And this is her term of endearment for him. So this is dode or dodi. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breast. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of Engedi. So we go from there's three descriptions of perfumes that are used here: nard, and then myrrh, and then henna. And in order, it's like the hardest to get. So nard, and that's nard is actually almost a transliteration of the Hebrew. Nerd is the Hebrew there, and this is nard. This particular product comes from the Himalayas. I mean, it's an exotic kind of perfume, so would have been very expensive, very hard to get. So the king is on a couch and kind of see him reclining there. It's of course the love scene, and she says that my nard gave forth his fragrance. So she's, of course, developing the sense of smell here. And then she compares him, her dode or dodi, my beloved, is to me a sachet of myrrh. Now, myrrh is a little bit easier to get. And of course, we have myrrh described in the New Testament. Of course, that's one of the gifts that the Magi bring to Jesus, and myrrh is connected a lot of times with burials. It's a little bit more difficult to get, but not nearly as hard to get as nard is. So she compares him to a sachet of myrrh that lies between her breasts. So you have this image of the two in this intimate embrace, and just like a sachet of myrrh would hang down there between her breast, well, then that's where he is. He's lying there on her breast and presumably on the couch. And then she has one more comparison to make. She says, "My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of Engedi." And henna was very, very common. Of course, we mainly associate henna today with the tattoo-like figures that are drawn upon hands and whatnot. But they also have a fragrance. Evidently, I don't know what henna smells like, but everything I read says it's kind of an earthy smell. But henna was readily available in the ancient Near East, and that's how she finishes this off, like a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of Engedi. Engedi is an oasis. Ein Gedi, it means spring of the goat, and it's an oasis on the western shore of the Dead Sea. I was there a couple of years ago when we went to Israel. Just a beautiful place. Like you're in the middle of like complete desert, and there's this water that just comes cascading down off the mountains, and there's deer everywhere. There's all sorts of plant growth. It's like this just beautiful oasis in the midst of the desert. And we know that, dating as far back as we can tell, that there were vineyards there. There were all kind of things that were grown there as far as fruit trees and whatnot. So that's how she compares them to this cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of Engedi. So it's an image of that's connected with smell and with feel and with sight, in which she describes in these various ways how precious he is to her.
Yeah, it seems like everything's smelling very good in this situation. Of course, this is good. So she's whipped out the most expensive, best smelling thing that she possesses for this occasion, this date in the king's house. Do you think there's anything to this, as you have like my beloved is like a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breasts? Is there because of what myrrh is, there is a sort of commitment unto death kind of enveloped in that language? Like when you say like, this is something I'm committed to this thing until the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is how I'm going to die like this.
Yeah, and that would certainly fit with one of the more famous lines of the Song of Songs, that love is stronger than death. So
Yeah.
there's this idea that a power greater than death itself has bonded us together. And yeah, the myrrh would fit with that theme.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, we have got to leave it there. We are out of time. We still this might take longer than we anticipated. There might be more
It might, yeah.
might be more going on, and we're trying
Lots to talk about.
trying to dissect the poetry here. But we'll be back next episode, and we will get into chapter 2 after we wrap up this first chapter. Chad, I'll see you then.
All right, see you then.